We can be our greatest allies, but we can also be our own worst enemies. And therefore, we need people to hold us accountable, but we often choose the wrong person. We choose the person that's going to enable us. And like you said, we're going to choose the person that makes us feel better in the moment, that lets us off the hook. When a real accountability partner is someone that cares about you, that has empathy, that listens to you. But when you say, I want to do this, but I can't, they look at you and they say, the truth is you can. And they hold that mirror up.
The Business Owner's Journey. I'm Nick Berry, and I've got real business owners telling their real stories, sharing their real lessons and strategies, so you don't have to figure it all out on your own. There is a segment of this show where Haley talks about accountability partners versus enablers, and it is probably my favorite thing that anyone that I've interviewed has said so far. This is the second time that Haley Perlus has been on the Business Owner's Journey podcast. The first one we did about mental toughness was a killer, and it's an audience favorite, so I had to have her back. And she's awesome. She did it again. Haley Perlus is a sport and performance psychologist, speaker, author, entrepreneur, and works with some of the world's biggest athletes, brands, leaders to help them get their minds right and reach their potential. So we split this into two parts. This first part, we talked about being risk tolerant, what it takes to be confident, working with people who have a fixed mindset, and how to find people who will actually hold you accountable. In the second part, we cover resilience, self-belief, balancing ambition and contentment, using the flow state, how she uses her now goals and her next goals, creating a critical thinking mind, and the role of adaptability and preparation in navigating challenges. So enjoy this two-part episode with Dr. Haley Perlus. So I'm really interested in hearing your story. You said nearly getting kicked out of a PhD program, and then really quickly said, not because of my grades.
I need my parents to know that it was not because of my grades.
Yeah,
Straight
it was because of your
A,
daredevilish behavior. Yeah.
People who know me would know that's a flat out lie too, but
Yeah.
I'm that good girl, or maybe I'm just the girl that never got caught, but
there you go. That's it right there. Like, you knew you took the right risk. So tell me about that. How do we do that?
That, and I mean, you just brought that home. You took the right risk. And I think that's a really valuable lesson that I am still learning. But yes, I almost got kicked out of my PhD program, and it was halfway through. So it's a 4-year degree. And it actually, because of this, took me 4.5 years, but that's okay. It was a four-year degree. And at the completion of year number 2, my advisor brought me into her office. First time I had ever heard of what she was about to tell me, but she told me that I should consider looking elsewhere, because my focus, my behaviors weren't in an alignment with the program. And in other words, she was basically telling me that I wasn't doing enough research. So to this day, I like to apply the research. I like to learn and study. And then I like to answer the question, how to make this applicable in our lives. I'm much more of a teacher and practical coach, if you will. But for my advisor, she wants to get published, and the school needs to be published in the program. And part of my job as a grad student was to help them and help myself, but help them with that. So in that moment, I was so scared. I was so angry because it had not been brought to my attention. I wasn't hiding anything. I was just going through and signing up for certain courses and asking to do this practical work. And no one said a word to me until this moment. So I was angry. I was frustrated. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. I really thought that the last 8 years were for nothing, because, the emotional reaction immediately is not a good one. And then I sat down with my coach, who is my father, and he and I looked at this from an angle of, I wasn't going to spend the next 2 years just doing research. If it's not coming honest, if I'm not coming by it honest, does that make sense? If I'm not doing it from like my heart, I'm not going to do a good job. You're not going to want me there. So we had to figure out how to collaborate. So, and I had to, a really good, valuable lesson that I've now learned in business is I had to listen. I had to ask her questions. I had to understand what what is it that she truly wants. And then once I understood her position, I already knew my position. And then I had to kind of what you said, like, what am I willing to risk? Because I wasn't willing to give her everything, but I certainly was willing to risk some discomfort, risk some time away from teaching and practical work to do some research. So I had to figure out a way to collaborate. I also really had to understand what is it from her list of priorities that's most important. And so I actually did what she wanted from like her priority list. I gave her the one thing she truly wanted. And then from there I got to do everything else I wanted. So I just had to listen and be willing to give first, which I think not something we all want to do, think about doing, but I had to give her first what she wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And then she kind of backed off and let me do my thing. And I
Was it,
graduated.
and you graduated. So was it the one thing? Was that more of the outcome? I'm kind of sorting this into like there's the what and then there's the how.
Yeah, she was going through, it wasn't just her professional life. She was also starting a family of her own. And so she needed the people that she was advising to step up and do some of the work that she may want to do, but just wasn't, now she's got her work life balance. So I needed to step up to her plate. And then once I crossed off some of the list, she let me teach more. So I provided the research that she needed to get done for herself and to help her kind of figure out her own work life balance starting a family. And then once I was able to give her that, and it wasn't like, well, I'll give you this if you give me this. I just gave her that. And then she softened and then allowed me, she's like, okay, you're helping me. I know you want to teach. Why don't you teach this class? Why don't you teach that class? Why don't you take this practical course? It was an interesting give before I take, but that was a risk I needed to make.
Yeah, what would have been so if that doesn't work out the way that you just described? What are the consequences?
She was going to ask me to leave. Or I was
And
going
if
to
you said no,
neglect, or I was going to neglect everything that I cared most about and then just do what they were asking me to do. And then for me personally, I know I lose passion, I lose heart. I probably wouldn't put for maximum effort. I wouldn't be a
mm-hmm.
very happy student every day. So it made me really think about, you and I've talked about this before, and I like music, I like lyrics, you know. And one thing is the song "My Way," Frank Sinatra. You have to learn what you're going to learn, and then you got to do it your way. From his song "My Way." And one of the ways, in addition, that I consider it to be more of like a trailblazing, was that I knew I wanted to start speaking, public speaking, and I was still in my PhD program, and everyone within the program, you go to where the conferences are, the sports psychology conferences, because that was what my degree was in, sports psychology. So everyone's going to these sports psychology conferences and spending the little money that they have and asking to speak. But it dawned on me that I wasn't really enjoying this so much. I was learning a lot, but I wasn't really enjoying it from an entrepreneurial, achieving my dreams perspective, because I was just talking to my competitors. I was talking to other sports psychologists. I wasn't really speaking to people who would hire me because they do exactly what I do. So I then took a risk and I picked up the phone and I called fitness conferences where I would be the only sports psychologist amongst the personal trainers and nutrition and group fitness instructors. And I looked at schools where they did not have sports psychology. And I picked up the phone and I asked if they would want a sports psychology course. And then I created a sports psychology program for the University of Colorado in Colorado Springs, and I did that for 9 years. And I introduced not just the undergrad, but then also a graduate program in sports psychology. So I looked to see what everyone was doing, speaking and teaching, and then I figured out how to do it my way and think outside the box a little bit. I think of that as a little bit of trailblazing, not always going where everyone's going, to taking a little bit of a twist to it and a risk.
Yeah. Well, so you know how I feel about agency. That's what I hear right there. I mean, there are a couple of things, but it's all leadership and your mindset and the willingness to like look at something a different way, but understand the stakeholders and their what they want, their view of things, and figuring out like, okay, well, how can I play to all hands and still like get what I want to get out of this? What is the opportunity created here?
It's a really good point. So, for example, the bringing sports psychology to university, when I approached it, I did my research and I chose the person who I thought would be open minded. And good for me,
I think that's brilliant.
he was. He
That's
was.
brilliant.
But it wasn't in, the sport and exercise science department. It was in it was funny, health and nursing department. But that's okay. He was open. And then he said to me, could you also teach health behavior change, which is something that I definitely felt I could do. And it is a passion of mine, even though I wanted to focus on sports psychology. Again, this give and take to look what it is that they want, and you give them what they say they want. And then once you do that, they're more willing to listen and allow you to get your foot in the door.
I can totally see how this happens because there's a component of it that is just they let their guard down once that gesture is made and they realize you're not necessarily being adversarial. You're demonstrating that you're trying to solve something for both of us and keep my interest in mind. That changes people like 180 degrees a lot of times.
Yeah. And I didn't know that at first. And that's one thing that my father helped me learn. And when I went through that PhD program, being asked to leave, it was because I wasn't doing what we just talked about. So I learned that valuable lesson.
And that's one that you probably apply every day in some way now without thinking about it.
Now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, I think there's a feeling that for me, if I get like closed-minded or kind of off with the principles that I want to operate by, it like changes the way that I feel physically. So, sometimes I can be having a conversation with Kelly and be like, I just need a minute to figure out what switch did I flip unintentionally here, and let me go back and like turn it back on because I'm not processing things the way that I want to process them.
Absolutely. And then you need that moment. You take a little bit of a reset, which is a fabulous tool you may want to talk about with me right now. But just take a little bit of a reset. You bring back the lessons that you have and the tools that you have, and then you lead with them. You lead with those tools. You lead with your best qualities instead of the emotional reaction to what you just experienced. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you stop, you take a moment to vent, take a moment to reflect, and then you reset, and then you have your framework that works. What is it that they want? What is it that I'm not hearing? And agency. I take personal responsibility in those types of conversations that I'm having with others.
As far as the being innovative and kind of taking risk and the mindset that you need to have to do that, do you think that that's something that most entrepreneurs or business owners probably lean toward that way anyway? Like it's more intuitive, or is it something that they've learned or are still fighting? I mean, I think I know how I am.
How are you?
Probably risk tolerant to a dangerous degree. Like in my circle of people, I don't need to be the uh, what we use to gauge our collective tolerance for risk. But it also lets me like think really freely with coming up with ways to solve problems. So I might have a lot of really way too risky options that come out of the ideation, but I was able to think further outside the box because I'm not usually as hamstrung by risk.
I do believe that we engage in taking more risk. However, I believe that one of the reasons we allow ourselves to take risk is because we also lead with something we're confident in. So I'm, for me personally, I'm more open to take a risk if there's something I believe in that I can bring to the table, something that I can trust. And if then I'm more focused on bringing that quality, that strength that I have. If I can focus on bringing that strength, even though I know it's a risky move, if I feel that I can, at least I've got something to believe in, I can go after that success and take that risk. And I think people who are in business for themselves, whether they know it or not, when they evaluate their risk or where they jump right into the deep end or they dip their toe, whatever it is, they're still leading with some type of quality strength that they know that they've got and that they can trust.
Yeah, that makes total sense. You have some sense of control or influence over how it's going to go. I can totally see it because I'm really comfortable with the unknown and problem solving. Like I'm probably going to be able to figure it out. It's not if, it's when. So if I, go rogue, go a little too far, and with a bad idea, to get a little too risky, I'm comfortable that I'm going to be able to figure out a way to correct things.
And the greatest thing about failing is, no, we don't want to fail, but the more you fail, the more you know that you can overcome failure. So you're kind of willing to take a risk because, okay, if the worst thing happens, I know I'm going to be okay. I'm going to, like you just said, I'm going to figure it out. And I'm not saying that's just for failure, that's with anything. But you have this idea that you're going to figure it out. And the more you've been able to figure it out, the more you know you can figure it out.
Yeah. So I used to tell my parents would love to hear this, but I used to comment around my parents like the reason that I'm so good at getting out of trouble is because I was so good at getting in
Getting
trouble.
it.
So I got in that situation so many times, like I can get out of it. I can figure it out. And there was some truth to that.
And probably not getting into trouble, but that's one of the reasons why in my line of work and in my industry, we talk about doing things consistently. Because every time you do something, the more and more you do it, the more you learn that you can do it, or bounce back, or recover. I was just asked a question, and I just created a little mental toughness moment. I'm gonna post it this, well, who knows when you're airing this, but at the time of this recording, I'm posting it this week, and it's about increasing productivity. And when we're getting distracted, or you've been in the office all day and you're just finding it's just one of those days where you find it difficult. And my recommendation is to just choose one task, whether for me, I like to do the easy task, 5-minute task, 10-minute task, whatever it might be, but it's something that I can just focus in for those few minutes. And then here's the thing where most people would say, okay, I get where you're going, Haley. You just want me to have an accomplishment, and then that boosts my confidence. And then, okay, one task completed, cross it off the list, do another one. I actually look at it a different way. I want to acknowledge the fact that I just was able to focus in, even though 5 minutes earlier I said I was distracted. So I just proved to myself that I can focus and tune out the distraction. So I just proved to myself that I can do this, therefore I can do it again. It's not about crossing off the list. It's about me being able to focus when I choose focus over distraction. You know that you can figure it out. So no matter what you're doing, you're going in there knowing, because consistently you know how to figure it out.
Mhm.
Consistently, I know how to choose focus. And that's why we like to do things repetitively, consistently, frequently, so that we know when we need to, we can pull that out. There's confidence is huge. The ability to trust in yourself is huge. And it's not about being perfect.
So what do you do when you don't have the reps?
All you need is one. And then that's what you build on. So if you don't have the reps, then you create one. So there's a theory in sport performance psychology called self-efficacy theory. And one of the ways to develop self-efficacy is having a past accomplishment and building on that. And if you don't have a past accomplishment, create one right now so that you have a past accomplishment. So for me, again, if we continue with the lines of productivity, if I haven't been productive all day or all week, well, I'm going to do one thing for 5 minutes, and I'm going to choose for just 5 minutes to focus in instead of getting lost in my distractions. I just had a past accomplishment. Now, that past accomplishment is quite current. It just happened, but I know I can do it. So then let's do it again. And then let's do it again. I mean, it all starts somewhere. We all have that first accomplishment, but then it's the consistency. And too often we get focused on what the task was that we accomplished instead of internalizing it, taking agency for it and saying, I accomplished that task because I chose to zone in and turn off everything else and just zone in. And then you build on that type of success, because that's the success that you own, that you're responsible for.
I think I see people tend to like look for reasons to disqualify the things that they could just as easily use as like evidence of their self-efficacy or, having something on their resume. Is it for me? That's all it took, is just realizing like if I put as much effort, at least as much, if not more effort into figuring out how to let this serve me instead of why it won't, then like things get easy really fast. How do we help someone to reframe things in that way? Or is that even viable? Is what I'm saying like I'm practicing without a license here?
Well, you're asking good questions. Skills are transferable. And so if you were able, and that's another way, like when you said, what if we don't have a past accomplishment? So the answer that I gave is we can create one right now. But then the other one is I'd argue against that. I mean, unless you were just born, I would argue you've done something and let's transfer those skills. And you know what I do with athletes in sport is huge. Athletes go through a tremendous amount of anxiety and stress when they transfer out of sport into whatever else they're going to do in their life, whether they're forced out or whether they choose to retire on their own. That they go into the world, in the world of business, for example, and some, not all, obviously, but some are very frightened, some are paralyzed. I'm an athlete. How am I going to go into business? And one of the things that we do, one of the tools, is that I ask them, what did you learn from sports? Or what do you love most about sports? Or what are you best about? What were your best qualities in sport? And very seldom is it the smell of the ball, how the bat felt in their hands. It's discipline, it's persistence, it's competition, it's camaraderie, it's being coachable. How do we take those strengths? How do we take those loves and transition them? So if you don't feel confident in this, in leading this team meeting that you're about to lead, well, you are the captain of your soccer team. You have leadership skills, you have leadership experience, just a different environment, but leadership experience is leadership experience. So we're going to transfer that in, past accomplishment. And we're not making things up. I'm not making things up. I'm finding something to believe in.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's when you start to look at things rather than saying this won't work because, or we can't, or shouldn't, or like, how could it work? Like, what's the best way that we could repurpose this for it to serve us? And, sometimes I wonder if I'm like really stretching it for myself, but I mean, habitually, I'm trying to figure out how to take situations and take what I can from it. Let it be, the best that I'm going to get from it and not more, and move on.
Yeah, what you're describing there, in my opinion, is you're learning it, or you already have it, or you're practicing it to make it more of a core trait for you would be open-mindedness. So we set goals, and I'm a big believer. I have problems with a lot of the goals we set, but in generally speaking, I do believe in the value of goals. And one of the reasons is that, when you have goals, you have direction. And when you have direction, you're more inclined to take action. But along the way, things happen. We don't know what we don't know, and new opportunities come, and what we thought was going to be possible isn't possible. So you have to be a little bit malleable, flexible, open-minded to say, okay, I thought that was it, and maybe it's not it. And or look, that's something unique and different. I never even knew that existed. So now I'm going to incorporate that. I mean, I thought I always wanted to be sport psychology until I became an adult myself. And then with all of the challenges and turmoils and all these obstacles, I realized that sport is not just for sport, which then gave me, well, wait a second, I could actually do this in sport and business and wellness. And, so set the goals, but then be open, not to just discovering new things, but also be open to it. It may not always go according to plan. And that's not just okay. Maybe that's actually going to be amazing. There's a there's a story I once heard a long time ago, but I sometimes use it in my public speaking. There's a story of a shoe salesman, and the shoe salesman was tasked with going. Two shoe salesmen were tasked for going to a third world country to go and sell shoes. And the first salesperson goes over, lands, looks around, and no one's wearing shoes. And so he calls the company and says, turn around, come back and get me. No one wears shoes. And then the second salesperson lands, looks around, and also sees that no one's wearing shoes. And he too calls the company and says, double the order. No one here is wearing shoes yet.
Yeah, I think I've heard that before, and that's like a great illustration, right? It's just in the way that you're choosing to look at things. Well, I say choosing. Is it as simple as a choice?
Some people say we don't make choices at all. Some people would say we do. Do I think it's as simple? Well, listen, there are two ways to look at it. Those were two ways to look at it. And I believe we make a choice.
Yeah. So I think maybe what I'm getting at is like, as far as that being kind of a trait, like one of those people is probably tends to look at things just in general more in that way. The other tends to see like the opportunity. And I think I'm tend to be kind of hard on people who I feel like are being like fixed about things, and like very absolute. Part of my responsibility is to bring out the best in each other and accomplish whatever our goals are. So I found myself kind of getting to a place in the conversation where I'm like, you're making somewhat of a choice here. I don't know if there's a hurdle in there that it requires more than you just saying, I want to think about this differently. Like, I'm not qualified to get into that part of it with them, but I also want to be able to, I don't want to tell them like, you just make a better choice and like leave them there kind of stuck in this like fixed mentality.
Yeah, a fixed mentality is hard. So we definitely want growth mindset, the ability to explore in our mind. But it's also, I'm actually diving more for myself. Yes, I've learned about it, but I even want to dive more into the unconscious mind myself and learning that there is an emotional connection there. And so, and though that's almost where the real learning happens. So, just telling someone to change their mind or telling someone that they made the wrong choice, but having, I don't know if that really works, but creating an experience where they get to emotionally feel through that actually triggers the unconscious mind where they can make those adjustments. They don't even realize they're doing it, but they make those adjustments. At the beginning you said, is it a choice? Are we just, some people just born optimistically to be, an optimist or a pessimist? Or I kind of believe in both, nurture and nature. But then you have to do things, again, using that word agency, then you have to do things for yourself. In my career, my consulting practice, people don't call me because everything's great and that they're happy, and like, they call me because they're struggling. So it is my, in that moment, they're not going to be a happy camper. And I spend a lot of my days helping people overcome that. So then when I'm home, my family, my friends, I want to surround myself with people that have that glass half full, that have that growth mindset, so that I can almost, you know, maintain it for myself and learn. Because if I'm spending all of my days with people who may have a fixed mindset and I'm trying to help them out of that, I need a little bit of some nourishment for myself. And that's a choice that I believe I make. I choose who to surround myself with.
Yeah, you're aware of what you need and aware of how you get it, and you're aware of what places the demand on it. That's definitely a choice. I think, yeah, I'm probably oversimplify it when I'm talking about it being, is it a choice that they make? Because maybe it's more like in fitness, right? So I want to be in better shape. I can, I guess, choose, but really, like it's not an instantaneous thing. What I'm going to have to do is make a series of choices over a period of time that are all going to have to favor this thing. There's going to have to be some intentionality about it. So I can decide that I want to do more to take care of myself, but like it ends there if I don't have any idea what those steps are to do that.
Yeah. And then the experience is that with every new choice, with every new behavior comes loss, because you're changing. So with every change comes loss. And there's an acceptance of that loss. In order for anybody to eat healthier, they have to obviously lose something unhealthy in their diet and their nutrition. And so it's not just what I want to be doing, it's also what I'm prepared to be losing, and prioritizing and making that making that change. And then it's also, again, it's that emotional experience too. And it's hard and it's uncomfortable and it's sometimes there's pain and there's a whole lot that goes into choosing. There's a whole lot that goes into making choices and sticking with them, what you
Yeah. I
value
think
most in life.
when it comes to your mindset, I guess, at least from my perspective, it's like the choice that I would be asking of someone would just be more of on the simpler side of the spectrum. It's like, are you open to the possibility of looking at things differently? Do you want to look at things in a way that will give you more options? And if we can get those boxes checked, then it's like, okay, then we'll figure out ways to like start moving in that direction.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I love to catch those help people with those aha moments because I just know how impactful they are for me. And let's stick to, you mentioned failure, working with someone in your business who's, just having them not have a fixed mindset about failure. And even though I don't think they always really truly mean it, but I don't know if you've ever heard an athlete or even a business person say failure is not an option. I actually, in those moments, and it's funny because it takes my intention is to help people just take the load off and remove some unnecessary negative pressure, anxiety. But in those moments when someone says that to me, totally get it. Failure is not an option. Tell me in the past where you failed. Like give me an experience in your life where you failed, where you've lost, sport, business, and then they tell you, okay, so failure is an option. And where are you now? How did you overcome that? How are you resilient? So I get that we don't want failure, but let's be really clear here. Failure is an option. It can happen. And then let that just go. So then the whole focus is how to, do I don't really love to hear do the best that you can, but the premise is let's just go out there and give it everything you've got to me with specific intentions and objectives that I can control. However, like the failure is not an option. Like that is just I'm in this box. I'm in this box. It's or something along the lines of I have no time. I have no time for recovery. I had this a couple of weeks ago. I was giving an in-person training, a resilience training, 6-hour day. And people are saying they just have no time to recover, even 5 minutes. Life is just so busy. And then at one point I asked, who's seen, I think it was like the new season of Shrinking. Who's seen the new season of Shrinking or any television show? And everyone just raises their hand. Oh yeah, that season's great. That series is great. Okay, so you don't have time for 5 minutes, but you've watched the entire season of this television show. It's those moments. So, like, I don't have time for this, or this is not an option. And then just in a couple of questions, but very casually, I'm not attacking anybody, but just very casually open the mind to, good point. And then maybe that opens the mind to other good points and to take on some new information and become more of a growth mindset than a fixed.
Yeah. Yeah. You can see the light bulbs come on and probably see some that don't.
But even if they won't admit it, I don't know. I still like to believe that when they leave the room in a moment to let this marinade, you know, and they still
Mhm.
may not take it on. They still may justify why they can't, but I don't know. I like to think that things marinate once you leave the room. And even the people who didn't quite let in that they were learning, I'd like to think that they do.
I think for the right people, they do for sure. Even if their like initial response is not one that indicates it, if they truly, their intentions really are to improve or learn what you're sharing with them, then I think it does. I think
Mhm.
so. This is a Nick theory, but I feel like um, there's a majority of the exposure that they have outside of that room with you is pulling them in the other direction though. Like there is no shortage of people and sources ready to tell you it's okay. It's not your fault. You don't have to do that or they shouldn't talk to you that way or give you every reason to sit in your state.
Yeah,
And that's like what you're up against, right?
for sure. And I think it's a therapeutic term, but it's a concept. I didn't make it up. It's not a Haley theory, but I love the Nick theory. Fixed false belief. And sometimes our friends, we have people who enable us, and people who enable us often confirm our fixed false beliefs. They care about us and want us to succeed, but they'll give us every reason why it's okay to not grow and not change. And and there's many reasons for that. That's why, you bring up I'm bouncing all around here, Nick. I hope it's okay. But you're bringing up concepts that I just think are so important. And one is accountability. We know that accountability is so important, one, because we can be our greatest allies, but we can also be our own worst enemies. And therefore, we need people to hold us accountable, but we often choose the wrong person. We choose the person that's going to enable us. And like you said, we're going to choose the person that makes us feel better in the moment, that lets us off the hook. When a real accountability partner is someone that cares about you, that has empathy, that listens to you. But when you say, I want to do this, but I can't, they look at you and they say, the truth is you can. And they hold that mirror up. And then you're not allowed to get upset with them when they do, right? Because that's it.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
You choose someone that when they say that, like, I don't know, maybe Kelly is a great accountability partner for you, but maybe she is awful because she's more of an enabler. I don't know. Vivian, your daughter's name is Vivian, right?
Yeah.
Hands down, she's probably going to be a fabulous accountability partner because she's more than willing to tell you when you screwed up.
Mm-hmm. And even it's my fault when other people screw up. So she's making sure that the message lands with me. But yeah, so there is a world, businesses are in your face, and there are a lot of them who are, it's packaged as self-care, but it's letting you off the hook, like you letting yourself off the hook. Maybe there's a fine line in there. And you said this the last time that we spoke, and it stuck with me. It's like you give yourself grace, but don't let yourself off the hook. And I think that's the part that gets left out. I think everybody gets stuck on grace. The message that you find everywhere is give yourself grace, period.
Right. But then, as you said, where's the agency in that?
Right.
Where's the growth mindset? Where's the, wait a second, I'm more capable.
Mm-hmm.
I can. But I'm right now putting together some content on self-belief. And one thing that I'm working with is that we earn our self-belief.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found the show valuable, you can say thanks and show your support simply by taking a quick second to like, share, and comment on the show. You can also find more information about each of my guests, all of the resources from the show, and myself at nickberry.info/TBOJ.